job, Pinky. My man Gary, I think you did it, baby. I look good. Pinky look, oh, say it again, oh. Pinky said, ow, when you shot.
You know this face. You definitely know this voice. For an entire generation, Clifton Powell was Pinky, the unforgettable, fast-talking hustler from the movie Friday who made audiences cry with laughter. He was a comedic icon, a harmless loudmouth who became a cultural legend. But behind the laughter and those classic lines, a much darker story was unfolding in his real life. A single night in a New Orleans hotel room led to a terrifying accusation that threatened to erase his entire legacy forever. The king of playing on-screen villains was suddenly accused of being one in real life. The court delivered one verdict, but Hollywood handed down a different sentence. What truly happened that night, and why was the truth buried so deep? The answer isn't just in the courtroom. It began decades earlier, on the streets where he learned how to survive. From a street of gunshots to a walk of fame, Clifton Powell was born and raised in Southeast Washington, D.C., a part of the city where, during the 1970s and 80s, the sound of gunshots was a nightly occurrence, often mistaken for fireworks by those who didn't know better. For young Powell, this environment was not a distant news story, but the immediate reality of his childhood, a constant soundtrack of danger that shaped his worldview. The first profound tragedy of his life struck when he was only 4 years old, the year his mother passed away, leaving a void that could never be filled. One of his most vivid and haunting memories is of that time, standing beside her coffin while holding the trembling hand of his father, a man who was battling his own demons with alcoholism. From that day forward, self-reliance became Powell's guiding principle, because he had no other choice. He learned to cook his own meals and navigate the treacherous social landscape of his neighborhood, which was dominated by gangs and street violence. He had to develop an instinct for survival, learning when to be invisible, when to stand his ground, and how to avoid the conflicts that claimed the lives of so many around him. He personally witnessed childhood, friends, boys he had played with just days before, either end up dead on the pavement or get taken away in handcuffs, their futures erased in an instant. There were countless nights when he lay in his bed, listening to the distant wail of police sirens, and wondered if he would even live long enough to grow up. This deep-seated fear, this intimate understanding of life and death, unknowingly became his greatest tool as an actor, giving him a rare ability to tap into genuine, unfiltered emotion on screen. When he finally made his way to Hollywood, Powell brought the grit and authenticity of his past with him, and the industry quickly took notice. His breakout role came in 1993 with the critically acclaimed film Menace to Society, where he played the character Chauncey. He wasn't just acting the part of a street-savvy hustler, he was embodying the spirit of the world he came from, infusing the role with a realism that was both captivating and unsettling. This performance announced his arrival as a powerful new force in acting. His career quickly gained momentum as he proved his versatility. He became a beloved comedic figure for an entire generation through his role as Pinky in the wildly popular Friday film series, where his character's over-the-top antics provided some of the franchise's most memorable moments. But his range extended far beyond comedy, as he took on serious roles in major films like Dead Presidents and the international blockbuster Rush Hour. Hollywood soon developed an unwritten rule. If a production needed an actor who could believably portray a fearsome villain, a strong father figure, or a cunning street hustler, the first call was often to Clifton Powell. He became one of the industry's most reliable and respected character actors, amassing a filmography of over 100 roles. The absolute peak of his career arrived in 2004 with the biographical film Ray, which chronicled the life of music legend Ray Charles. In the film, Powell played Jeff Brown, the singer's longtime manager and close confidant, acting opposite Jamie Foxx in his Oscar-winning performance. Powell's portrayal was so compelling that he earned a prestigious NAACP Image Award nomination, a significant recognition of his dramatic talent. For many, his performances were just skilled acting, but few understood the truth behind his craft. Every time he stepped into the shoes of a bad guy or a character forged by hardship, he was drawing from a deep well of personal experience, using his art to confront and process the wounds of his own past. Hollywood had given him fame and fortune, a way out of the life he was destined for. But the escape came at a high price, and soon the cracks in his personal life began to show. The first cracks in the foundation. After enduring a childhood defined by instability and loss, Clifton Powell's deepest desire was to build the one thing he never had: a peaceful and stable family. He married Kimberly Powell, and with her, he dreamed of creating a loving home where his children would feel safe and supported, free from the fears that had plagued his own youth. However, the demands of a successful Hollywood career proved to be a relentless force, pulling him away from the very family he was working so hard to provide for. His filming schedules were grueling, often requiring him to be away from home for up to 70% of the year. He was succeeding in bringing home substantial paychecks, but he was failing to bring home the one thing his family needed most: himself. His children, Clifton Jr. and May, grew up with a father who was more of a familiar face on a television screen than a consistent presence in their daily lives. He missed parent-teacher conferences, school plays, and simple family dinners, his absence creating a growing distance between him and his loved ones. In a moment of painful honesty years later, Powell admitted his regret, stating, "I wasn't there for my kids the way I should have been. I was too focused on my career, and I failed as a father." This emotional distance eventually became an unbridgeable chasm, and the marriage he had placed so much hope in began to crumble under the pressure. The arguments became more frequent, the love faded, and eventually, the union ended in a devastating divorce. The separation was not only emotionally heartbreaking, but also financially catastrophic, costing him an estimated $5 million in assets. His dream of a perfect family life was shattered. Reeling from the collapse of his marriage, Powell found himself drawn into a dangerous cycle of self-destruction, seeking refuge from his pain in the high-stakes world of gambling. The bright lights and constant action of casinos in Las Vegas offered a temporary escape from his loneliness and guilt. Inside those walls, he could forget his problems for a few hours. According to his own account, he was losing between $30,000 and $50,000 annually at the gambling tables, a significant financial drain that compounded his problems. He also found himself surrounded by superficial relationships with people who were attracted to his fame and money rather than the man himself. At the height of his professional success, he felt more alone and empty than ever before. He had escaped the streets, and he had conquered Hollywood. But he was now losing the battle against his own inner demons, slowly dismantling the empire he had spent a lifetime building. He was losing his family and his fortune, but the most destructive blow, an event that threatened to erase everything he had ever worked for, was still yet to come. The fateful night in New Orleans. In the late summer of 2011, Clifton Powell was in New Orleans for an event, and after his obligations were met, he decided to visit Harrah's Casino in the heart of the city. It was there that he met Keontae Myers, a cocktail waitress working that evening. The two began talking, and, according to initial accounts, there was a mutual attraction. Powell invited Myers back to his hotel room, and she agreed. What began as a seemingly consensual encounter between two adults would soon spiral into a career-defining nightmare. Something went terribly wrong behind the closed door of that hotel room. A few days later, the celebrity news website TMZ broke a shocking story with a headline that would forever be attached to Powell's name. Ray actor Clifton Powell sued for rape. In her lawsuit, Myers claimed that while the encounter began consensually, she had at one point told him to stop, and she alleged that he did not. Instantly, Clifton Powell's name and reputation were tarnished by the devastating accusation. The career he had spent decades building was now on the verge of total collapse. Powell immediately and forcefully denied the allegations, maintaining his complete innocence and insisting that the entire encounter had been consensual from start to finish. He went a step further, vowing to file a countersuit against Myers for defamation. This marked the beginning of a long and grueling legal battle that would stretch on for nearly 7 years, keeping the scandal alive in the public eye. The legal process began with a criminal investigation. After reviewing the case, prosecutors declined to file charges against Powell, citing a lack of evidence to prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. For Powell, this was a major victory and a legal vindication. However, his ordeal was far from over. Myers proceeded with a civil lawsuit, seeking over $75,000 in damages. This civil case dragged on for 6 years, ensuring that Powell's name remained associated with the ugly accusation every time a new article was published. Finally, in 2017, a judge dismissed the civil suit against him. A year later, in 2018, Powell's countersuit was also dismissed, effectively bringing the legal saga to a close. On paper, Clifton Powell had won. He was a free man, cleared of all charges. But while the court of law found him innocent, the court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict long ago. That verdict was swift, brutal, and irreversible. The consequences for his career were catastrophic. The phone calls from agents and producers stopped coming. He recalled being cast in a television show where he was promised a role in 7 or 8 episodes. After the news broke, his part was cut down to 2 episodes and then eliminated entirely. The same producers who had once eagerly sought him out now avoided him as if he were toxic. For Powell, the emotional toll was immense, a pain he described as the worst he had felt since his father's death. As a father himself, he was horrified by the thought of his own daughter reading such terrible headlines about him. He had been exonerated by the legal system, but his image was permanently damaged. The accusation, though unproven in court, became a stain that he could not wash away. This sudden and public scandal was a devastating blow, yet it was connected to a quieter, more insidious battle he had been fighting throughout his entire career in Hollywood. The persistent shadow of colorism. Long before the incident in New Orleans, Clifton Powell's career was already hampered by an invisible but powerful barrier within Hollywood: colorism. This form of prejudice, which often favors black actors with lighter skin tones over those with darker complexions, was a constant reality for him. With his deep, dark skin, Powell experienced this discrimination firsthand and spoke about it openly throughout his career. He recounted numerous instances where he was rejected for roles for reasons that had nothing to do with his acting ability. Casting directors and producers would tell him that his skin was too dark for a particular part, or that his appearance was too intimidating for audiences to sympathize with. One of the most cutting remarks he received was that casting him in a romantic lead role would make the audience run away. As a result of this systemic bias, he was consistently typecast, relegated to a narrow range of roles. Hollywood celebrated him when he played a menacing gangster, a violent criminal, or a ruthless drug lord, as these characters fit neatly into the industry's harmful stereotypes of black men. However, whenever he auditioned for the role of a loving father, a romantic partner, or a relatable hero, the door was firmly shut in his face. This ongoing struggle against industry prejudice fostered a deep sense of solidarity in Powell for other black artists trying to succeed against the odds. This was most evident in his public criticism of the acclaimed director Spike Lee, who had made negative comments about fellow black entertainers like Tyler Perry. For Powell, this was an unacceptable betrayal of their community. He made his position clear with a powerful statement: "I don't respect anyone. I don't care if it's my son, my daughter, or myself. If you go out and talk bad about another black person who is trying to make it, we have enough enemies on the outside." Amidst this constant fight for respect and opportunity, his NAACP Image Award nomination for Ray was more than just a career milestone. It was a moment of profound validation. It was a rare instance where his talent was allowed to shine in a complex, multidimensional role, proving that he was capable of so much more than the stereotypes Hollywood confined him to. It was a brief but significant victory, in his personal war against the industry's deep-seated biases. He had fought his way off the streets of D.C. He had fought against racial prejudice in his profession, and he had fought a draining legal battle to clear his name. But after all these fights, a final, lingering question remained. What truly was Clifton Powell's final sentence? The unspoken verdict. In the eyes of the law, Clifton Powell is an innocent man. No criminal sentence was ever handed down, and he never spent a day in jail for the accusation that threatened to ruin him. The court system ultimately exonerated him completely. But that legal victory was hollow, because the final verdict on his life and career was not delivered by a judge in a courtroom. It was delivered by Hollywood and the public. Despite being legally cleared, his career never fully recovered. The shadow of the accusation clung to him, making him a liability in an industry that prizes public image above all else. He was quietly and systematically sidelined, not by a formal decree, but by a collective turning of backs. Clifton Powell won his case in the court of law, but he lost decisively in the far more unforgiving court of public opinion and in the boardrooms of a multi-billion-dollar industry. His story leaves us with a troubling and important question. Can a talented black man, who has already overcome a life of poverty and systemic racism, ever truly recover after being publicly buried by an unproven allegation? The verdict from the legal system was clear, but the silent final sentence from Hollywood appears to be for life.